So I'm sitting here with Brian Sherman, and he is the VP, lead music producer, and also the director of sonic design at Man Made Music Studio in Los Angeles, California. And he has a few incredible projects on his own. His All Brian's sprays, which are great scents that capture the mood perfectly. His Gold Ablaze EP, which I assume you're working on more of because it's great and I listen to it while I'm working.
Thank you.
And also your Masternauts, um, more dance oriented music.
Yeah, that's all. That's all fairly accurate. I'll make a couple tweaks because things have also recently changed. The
Yeah.
For 8 years, I've worked at a company, almost nine now, which was called Man Made Music, which has recently changed names to Made Music Studio. One thing I'm really happy that the company has decided to do is really embrace BDJ principles, so like belonging, dignity, and justice, which included changing the name of the company from a gendered name like man and making it more about what we're doing, which is making things, to be a little bit more open, inclusive, and egalitarian. So it's now Made Music Studio. I am definitely the VP, lead music producer, and director of sonic design. So I'm responsible for both the overall creative output from our West Coast studio and the clients we work on there, but also the director of sonic design means that I have a focus and an expertise in radio's got to switch
in cat
um,
beds.
in cat petting, but also user interface sounds. So sounds for streaming platforms and apps and products. That's kind of an area that I've had um, some expertise in for a while. All Brian's, which I do love, and it is a essential oil fragrance line, rebranded to Atmosphere sprays. As much as I have loved the All Brian's thing, the attempt was to be a little bit more, again, clear about what it is.
Yeah.
So Atmosphere Sprays is the name change there. You are right about Gold Ablaze. Gold Ablaze is my most recent project uh, of sort of like textural lo-fi. I'm glad you say you use it while working. I actually considered it sort of like music for productivity in a way. And that is sort of the contrast to my other project, Mastronaut, which is like two sides of my creative coin, where I put it more of like Mastronaut is like very loud and bright, and Golden Blaze is more chill and sort of like hazy. And so those two projects are like my main creative output right now, which give me two different perspectives, or at least I can share two different creative perspectives that I like to create under.
How you talk about the change at the company and how you've been changing your personal products um, leads to this overall sense I have of you, which is just an incredible eye for refining, where your company been able to see problems with how it portrays itself in the world and is changing name and changing approach to match that. And you, with your sense and your music approaches, also are constantly looking for ways that you can captivate your audience better and be more clear with your messaging. And that's
I
really interesting how cohesive that is in your life.
No, thank you for saying that, and that's a very kind overview. It was interesting when you had sent some questions ahead of sort of like I'm interested that you think about refinement because I think that's really accurate. Sort of like how can you constantly refine and iterate on something, but I think I wouldn't be able to refine and iterate on any of these projects if I didn't have originally a really strong and deliberate point of view for each one of them. So all of these projects that we talked about, both the music projects and the design fragrance kind of idea, all come from like a really concrete idea to begin with, or a concrete concept to begin with. And then, yeah, like as I've explored it, it's gotten more clear or refined or differentiated from each other. Or maybe we'll end up not being differentiated from each other, where Mastronaut and Gold Ablaze will fuse or something. I don't really know where that's going to happen, but it's interesting to see them all kind of wander down their own creative paths.
Just a tangent with the Gold Ablaze and Mastronauts, how you describe them, what the differences are, made me consider like the perfect soundtrack or day-long soundtrack for want to focus and be really productive working and typing away, and then oh god, I'm so frustrated, I can't stand it, and I just get up and dance and take it out, and then okay, all right, I'm ready to get back in it.
Yeah, totally. That's a great descriptor for
Yeah.
sure.
So, if you just had a 10 hours of that, then that's all I would need to listen to ever.
The only other thing I would add, because I haven't released any of this, but through my work at Made Music Studio, I've also done a lot of work with ambiences or music and sound for productivity and relaxation. So these are more ambient pieces of music that contain textures, but also use different sonic technology like entrainment to move your heart rate. We can move physiology through sound. So one of the last pieces I would probably, and I should just release this at some point, is some ambiences for relaxing or sleeping. So then you've got Gold Ablaze in the morning, and you can blast off with Mastronaut midday for a recharger, and then go back to Gold Ablaze, and then ultimately use the ambience to relax and go to sleep and just go through the night. So it's a curated
Ultimately,
24-hour experience.
yeah, ultimately, you never have to turn off the Brian's vibes. You
Just
can
keep it going.
keep
Spray the
going day and
sprays.
night.
This is great. I love it. I didn't even know I had created such a cohesive brand. Look at that.
You got a full lifestyle brand, and you didn't even know it. Brian's
Exactly.
lifestyle. That's a lot of fun. So with you talking about a concrete vision behind each of these projects, it makes me think of my own path in life, which has rarely had much concrete vision and rather been all over the place. And right now I'm trying to channel that into a concrete vision for a show right here, where I explore the different avenues of my creativity while learning from and interviewing professionals who are much better at the various things. And so I
I
sent
love
you.
it.
Thank you.
It's such a
So
cool idea.
yeah, I'm very excited. You are my first interview for this, and
Oh,
so
great.
thank you
Oh,
so
I'm
much.
honored. Thanks for having me.
I'm really honored to have you because just looking a little bit more into your life and seeing the the focus behind each of your projects is it's great. It's inspiring.
Awesome.
And so then from inspiration, I moved to my personal embarrassment to then play for you my first draft of a theme song for the show.
Yes,
Did you get a chance to listen to it?
I did. I gave it a quick listen last night, which I like to, with anything, get some distance. I think, well, yeah,
Mhm.
I think having distance from anything is really important. So, like, I had a first impression, and then I went to sleep, and then I listened to it this morning. So, like, there's the end of night, about ready to go to bed, kind of like,
Mhm.
losing that state of consciousness, and then the caffeinated early morning version of it. So, um,
Very different perspectives.
I my whole job is basically around giving feedback. So I'm curious, like, if you'd like me to approach this as like if you had submitted a demo to me, if I was giving you feedback, would that be helpful or not?
Yes, absolutely. I think that however you feel best about giving feedback is great. Whatever you can give to help me and other people who have just started trying to record something on their own is great. And please in try to go full out and be as harsh, as severe as you would like to be.
It's funny that you said that too, because I think I don't think feedback has to be harsh or severe as much as it can be clear or deliberate. So I'll give you my stuff and you can tell me what you think. So my first impression overall is I love it conceptually. I think the concept of this, I don't know exactly the bounds of your show, But having known you and having known kind of like what I think you're going to, I think the concept is great. It feels it feels like really fun, really open. So it's got, if I think about Coyote and I think about coyotes in the wild, there's like a lot of reverb on the guitar. So there's kind of like a lot of space that's there. I think at the end, I really loved the ending with like, natural sound coming in. I'm not sure if that came directly from the microphone and was real nature or if you had somehow brought in some nature sounds, but I thought that was a great ending to that, which reminded me of like Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. If you know that show, the intro song is fantastic, and it ends with kind of like some very open, atmospheric nature sounds. So I think that's cool because you're leading listeners from your intro song into the content. That's like a great way to kind of draw them in, sort of like using that.
Hmm.
I think my
Yeah.
my main points of feedback for refinement would be you've got what I consider sort of like two sections. You start the guitar riff, solo voice comes in, then you double it, and it's sort of like the Coyote art show. And then we kind of have a second version of that, which is sort of like the second verse, if you will, to get to the like ultimate climax. I think if you were going to refine this, my two pieces of input to refine would be on that second pass through for just listener interest, you should introduce another instrument. So you've got guitar, you've got voice, would love to hear some other thing, whether it's bass or piano, or I think percussion would be pretty fun, a shaker, or like you playing on the table or something like that. This is all very raw and real and like you playing. So anything that feels super organic. Or another alternative would be this is about your voice and your art. So can you make sounds with your voice or with art and use those as like the percussive piece that's in there?
Ooh, some paint splatter
Pain
as
splatter. That's definitely one that I was thinking.
okay.
And then it's cheesy necessarily, but might draw people in. I thought there was an opportunity to introduce the coyote howl throughout there, or some iconic version of that, and that is sort of like your sting. So like you've got yourself singing the refrain, but you can create sort of a ownable sonic element, whether it's the coyote yowl or like the paint splatter or whatever that happens to be, or a combination of those things. And then when people reference your theme, they'll reference that little piece, and that can also show up if you wanted to throughout the show as like moments of transition or something like that.
Little moments of oh.
Exactly, and then we're on to a next segment or something like that. But I thought it was great. I think you have some mix issues that I think could be handled, and I'd be happy to help with that as well, just to make sure that the voice is heard above the very reverberant guitars. But yeah, I thought it was great.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate that for my first draft. Um, for anyone listening and trying to create a theme song on their own, I just using my phone's voice recorder recorded my guitar piece, then listened to it with headphones while I recorded a vocal on top of that, and kept kind of layering that. Now I have a couple better microphones, but is there any like basic setup that you would recommend for someone starting out recording music, just trying to make music and record it?
It's a really good question. I think you said you were using GarageBand. I don't know if that means you're using it on your phone or on a Mac.
Yeah.
On a
On my,
laptop, yeah. Um, I think the good news is the barrier to entry is so low these days, as far as like you said, even most phones have a pretty decent microphone. So if you have nothing but your phone, you could record into GarageBand on your phone, which I think is still a free app on iPhones. There are other alternatives on Android, but Android has its own issues with inherent in the software, but I'll mention that later. But if you have an iPhone, you have GarageBand, you have a recorder, you can go for it. That, just start recording. And I think the main thing, which is true, I think, of the recordings you did as well, is that no matter whether you have the least expensive mic or the most expensive mic or the most expensive setup, the acoustics in which you record anything are critical to how that is going to sound. So if you can go into a closet that has a bunch of clothes surrounding you and be able to record whatever you're doing in there, that would be the most neutral type environment that then you could apply effects later. So while you could record this in like a cavern and get something really cool and acoustic, there's no way to really like change that after the fact. It's sort of printed onto the audio. So I recommend, no matter what the tools are, find the environment in which you can sound most neutral, and then after that you can apply effects and processing to make it sound however you want.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. That I've got a closet right here behind me, and maybe I've been on the wrong side of the closet. I need to get
Get
into the
in.
closet to make music.
That's right. Get in there.
Knew it. Yeah, thank you for that feedback. That's that's interesting. That's a lot for me to think about already. Hmm. All right, so we've got instrument in the second verse, more
Yeah.
instrumentation, record the neutral as neutral of sound as possible. Um, I think that my two little Omni microphones that can record in sync should now be enough for
Yeah.
decent audio in a neutral environment.
Give it a
And
shot. My advice would just be to, this draft is great. I think keep going with refinement and development.
yeah, thank you.
But the concept is there. I think the concept is really strong. So I think you're in a good place.
Awesome. Um, there's something else you said, oh, about mixing, mastering the vocals so that they're more clear in a track. Is there, yeah, a basic way that you can describe that?
This is a whole life's work of mixing and mastering. Um, there are luckily really fantastic resources these days on YouTube for free. There's a musician producer named Andrew Huang who's amazing and has like millions of followers. And I'd recommend anybody check out his videos for some tips on it. Because otherwise, I think I would get into sort of like a mixing mastering masterclass at that, which I'd be happy to do, but we'd be going through hours. And I think in general, just the advice I gave on like if your recording starts in a neutral environment, you'll have a much easier time making it clear above the other instruments. Because then it's really just volume and then using other tools like compression and EQ to help them stand out.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, then we'll get back to you when I have like at least a few people watching this show for the
Great.
full Brian mastering masterclass.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, it'd be my pleasure.
That'll be awesome. I don't think I gave too much of the background of why you are the ultimate person in giving feedback for any kind of song writing attempt, which is that you, Brian, went to university with a bachelor's degree in jazz and jazz studies from New England Conservatory of Music, and then to New York University with a Master of Arts in Music Performance, where you focused on saxophone.
I
Is that?
did, yes. Yeah, I began as a saxophone player. That was like my main start was as an alto sax player. And the first school I went to was the University of Colorado Boulder, and I was there for 2 years where I really developed some really great basic technique. I kind of unlearned some really bad technique I had learned in high school, so I learned that at CU Boulder, and then yeah, did happen to audition at New England Conservatory and got accepted there, which was awesome. That was a huge growth in my. That was probably the biggest growth in my creativity up to that point, and just musical ability. And then NYU was great, and but to be frank, was a an opportunity to move to New York, and I met great people there. But it was sort of like, can I get my degree, and then have a reason to move to New York? Yeah,
Huh.
that's how I got
Interesting.
started. Yeah.
What was this 6 years of your life that you were not working in music?
That's a great question. I left NYU with a master's, and I had been, even going back to NEC, New England Conservatory, I had been performing with bands. So I'd had a band at NEC, which was a sort of like a trio with saxophone, keys, and drums, but it was more electronic, kind of like jazz fusion, if anything. So I was really interested in bringing electronics into acoustic sounds. And that started at NEC, and it continued at NYU as well. And at NYU, I met Danny Venn, who happens to be the EVP producer at Made Music Studio in New York. So we met there, and she and I were in a band called Hans Blix, which kind of took it even further, which was a totally improvised, free improvisation, but also very electronics focused. And as opposed to what most people think about of like free jazz, kind of like Sun Ra 60s crazy psychedelic stuff, we were trying to in real time create compositions. So it was how quickly can you, but improvising, find a key and a theme and a riff and a hook and expand that and build solos around it. So when I left NYU, my goal was to play music, but also have a job that would pay me money. So when I left NYU, I actually got a job at Corcoran, which is a real estate agency, and I thought that I could sell properties while also playing gigs all the time. This was in 2008, which was the crash of the market. So I started at like the absolute worst time to start in real estate. And I was there for about
Houses
a
are
year.
cheap.
Was that?
Houses are cheap.
Yeah,
Even
exactly.
while they're hot.
Everybody could get a mortgage. And no, basically, after about a year, they fired half the staff, and I was one of them, which was fine because it was not for me. And then ended up at Apple. And what was great working at Apple is they needed trainers for a program called One to One, and it was essentially personal training sessions, or you would do group workshops. And at the time, I was really starting to get familiar with Logic Pro, which is Apple's music software, and they sent us to Cupertino to get certified in both facilitation, ways of training, but also that software. So I got certified in Logic. So while at Apple, I actually made a ton of music. I started becoming, that's really was the beginning of me being a producer, where I met a bunch of singer-songwriters and artists, and they would come to my little Flatbush, Brooklyn studio apartment, which I called Velvet Studios because I had velvet curtains in one corner. That was like the booth area. And I recorded a bunch of different people and mixed and mastered a whole bunch of singer-songwriter music. And so that time at Apple was actually
Wow.
hugely creative for me. It was actually probably one of the most creative times because I also, having come out of New England Conservatory where I met amazing musicians, and even at NYU I met like Danny Venn and other people, amazing musicians. Coming to Apple was the first time that I was surrounded with just creative people that seemed very much like me. Photographers, videographers, painters, poets, because all these people had been drawn to this program, so we were all kind of hanging out together, and so it was a really hugely influential creative time, and so I was there for I think like 4.5 years. Eventually, I my position became events coordinator at the Grand Central store when it opened, which was I don't even remember 2011, 2012 or something like that. So I was kind of running events that were there and running a whole team of workshop presenters, but still playing and writing music. And then at around that time, because I was friends with Danny Venn, and she had gotten a job at, well, at the time it was Man Made Music, so she had gotten a job there as a producer. She started bringing me on board to write themes for brands, or to help her write themes for brands. And so the owner of Man Made Music, Joel Beckerman, knew me as a composer and a producer, and he knew that I worked at Apple, and they had just landed a huge job with the Spanish language television Univision and its sister or parent channel called Unimas, and they needed someone to come on board. So they hired me to come to Man-Made. And at the time, I was actually hired as an account person because they had enough creatives, but they didn't have somebody who could work with clients. And Joel knew that I, had worked at Apple, and he thought I could do both. But within about 6 months, it was clear that I definitely wanted to be a producer. So I just came onto the creative team,
Uh-huh.
and that's where I've been ever since. So I've been doing that, and then but still while working at Man-Made, at the time was still playing with this band Hans Blix, and then just continued to learn more and more about producing, using the computer, but also mixing and mastering, which I fell in love with that process, and for the first time found something that was as if not more creatively gratifying than performing. Because up until then, I was like performing on saxophone, and that was like to me the pinnacle. Improvisation, creating improvisational music was the pinnacle of creativity. Where all of a sudden I found this way of creating music that also seemed limitless and endless through mixing, mastering, and producing in the computer. And so that's kind of the path that I've been running down. I still play saxophone, and I was still, even when I was in New York, played with different bands. But that was a big change for me of moving more into production and creating and composing, but also mixing other people's music and mastering other people's music as well.
Yeah, amazing. And so now you are or you are a singular master of music production, where yes, you are the go-to person for if a lot of brands just want the perfect note in the right way,
or 4 notes or 5 notes, whatever that identity happens to be. Yeah.
or a full song, right? So,
Yes. Yeah. And I wouldn't consider myself a master only because like the beauty of music in particular, which has been the through line of all of my creative pursuits, is endless. There's never an end to learning about this. And if anything, I'm now maybe 10 or 12 years into music production, and I just feel like just now I'm starting to really get what I'm producing, or I'm starting to make stuff that I'm like finally feeling like really good about. It really took like a decade worth of work to get to this place, and I feel like there's still just so much more to learn and to be explored.
yeah, wow. All right, everyone get started. Just pick something, start practicing.
it, it's true.
Maybe.
Although I've met other people too who like yourself included, where sometimes the creative path, and or let's say oftentimes the creative path is never linear. It wasn't linear for me either. I thought I was going to be a saxophone professor in Colorado. That's what I thought my eventual life was going to be. I was going to work at a college and I was going to teach saxophone, and it brought me all over the place. I didn't think I was going to live in New York. I didn't think I was going to live in Los Angeles. So I think for other people, and even for myself in some capacity, like there's so much interesting creative outlets to explore in visual, in the physical, in music, and I think it's just as valid to explore, touch on all these different types of creativity. I have a really good friend who's an amazing graphic designer, but he's also a fantastic musician and singer and guitar player, and loves making videos too, and has kind of like his own just lifestyle design aesthetic or something like that. And so if anything, I would
Uh-huh.
say his brand is not a singular focus. It's the embodiment of multiple types of creativity that he gets to kind of bounce between depending on what he feels like on a particular day, which I think is just as valid at the end of the day.
Well, I really hope so, because that is definitely my approach so far. I really, I'm praying, I hope that with just a continual focus on creativity and finding beauty, that that eventually maybe it won't matter so much what the particular focus is, but that
Yeah.
it's about the artistic mindset and the ability to focus and refine and follow through with a vision with whatever you do. I
Yeah.
hope.
No, that's true. Following through for sure. Whatever I'd say, whatever it is that you're doing, finish it. And I would actually push even further to say that whatever it is that you're doing, finish it and share it. There's plenty of room in the world right now for content, so there's no
Yeah.
reason not to. But understand, and for myself too, this was definitely a lesson to be learned, that you are ultimately, or maybe always, making the art for yourself. I think Miles Davis had a similar quote or something like that. I make the music for me. If someone else cares, like, great, but the sharing part should be just to be able to get it out to others without expectation of reward, I guess. You
Yeah.
never know.
Yes. Wow. I find that to be such a personally challenging dichotomy
Yeah.
where, like, when I make art just totally for myself in my little art bubble, painting, whatever, like most of last year, I was just
Mm.
in my house bubble painting.
Yeah.
And I was pretty depressed for for most of it.
Yeah.
And it's like as an artist, for me at least, I need to be able to share. I need to have purpose where the art that I'm doing is giving something. And yet, absolutely, you're right. If the focus becomes about too much on the giving end, that this is for someone else to witness, this is for the audience, then it loses its magic, where it has to be, I am doing this for myself, for the joy of creatively letting it out, and at the same time it has to be available for others.
That's totally true, and I agree with you completely on the sharing aspect, and I think awareness of audience is good. I think I'm speaking from personal experience of my past self of like the concern ends up being expectation. So if you have an expectation that this is going to be received a certain way, I think that stifles creativity and ultimately just creates a lot of insecurity, which is the barrier, the immediate barrier to creativity. You can't have that insecurity. You have to be able to run free with an idea to be able to fully express yourself. Ultimately, isn't that what art is? Is like it's a personal expression. It's the lens of one unique experience that's constantly changing, and then being placed onto or coming out of that experience comes something, music, art, video, something. Um, I guess my watch out is just like you can share with if you can share with no expectations, because just as you
Yeah.
individually create a piece of art, you can never know how an individual will receive that or how the audience will receive that, and that will be unique to everyone. And hopefully, is a positive response, might be a negative response, might be no response, but that's the only part I think to as much as possible let go of the expectation of the audience.
Yeah, I love that. But still share. Don't
Share,
get
get it
trapped in a
out
bubble.
there, please. Share what you have. Share your work with the world, everyone.
What you said reminded me of something I heard from Malcolm Gladwell. He's a writer with the New Yorker and has a great podcast. That when he was starting to publish articles and having 10,000 people read them, he'd get hate mail from 1,000 people. And it would feel so debilitating for him. Um, but he managed to keep going. And now that he releases articles to 10 million people, he will get negative feedback from 100,000 people. And it's like for him, been consistently 10% of people hate whatever he's doing. And and so that comes with it. And you've got to
What a
get
great
used
ratio. Are you kidding? 90% success rate? I'd say that's like that's a huge win. Amazing.
he's pretty good at what he does.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to get more like 20% success at this point. I mean, the world's big.
totally. That's all we can hope for.
Yeah. Wow. That's it was really fun talking to you, Brian.
It's been great, for sure.
So before jumping off, um, I definitely do still have a variety of other questions I could ask you and things
Sure.
that you read last night. I also would like to know, I guess, if you have any feedback of for me right now in giving you an interview, and if there's anything like, or even in presenting to you that rough draft of a song, like what could be more useful to you in being interviewed or in receiving a demo?
I think starting on the interview side, I think the prep was great in that you had a list of questions of which you then let me, the interviewee, sort of be like, which ones do you feel you want to spend some emphasis on? So I think that was really helpful because it just kind of like gave some context, I think, which was great. So I had at least like some context for what we are going to be talking about. My quick turn into like old Apple Apple training stuff is humans have a really difficult time with ambiguity. So if you can set expectations, if you can set a context, or ideally for any experience, set a workflow, as in, hi guys, welcome. Here's what we're talking about today. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. We'll take a break, and then we'll do this. You'll find that like the anxiety level goes down a lot for most people. So You did a great
Great.
setup. I think if you could continue to work to set correct expectations for time, how long the interview is going to be, um, maybe like how you'll approach it. Of like, I'll set up and introduce you. You can introduce yourself, and we'll kind of free form go through the questions that we had sort of agreed upon. So overall, I think you're doing really well there. I think if you can codify that a little bit more, it will probably help with some people. And conversely, some people who are like super, open space creativity people may have a hard time with a rigid form. So you might have them push back on that.
Yeah.
So to
Well, I
pivot to
think
your demo, oh, go ahead.
oh, oh, I just think the lack of rigidity is the easy thing for me. So if I try to have rigidity and then someone just can't handle it, then that'll be easy.
Yeah, all out the window, totally. Luckily for me, who's quite focused and deliberate, as mentioned, this was great. On the demo side, I would say take those learnings from what you did with the interview and apply it to the demo. So you sent me the demo, and your approach was kind of like, give me some harsh feedback on my first draft of this thing. I think in presenting any work, and I would say this for 99%, yeah, 99% of the work that I do with brands and with clients is about setting expectations and setting a strong point of view. I mentioned that earlier with like my own work. I think that has influenced my own work as working for ManMade. So what you could have done with your demo is given me context for. You mentioned kind of how you created it, but like, what was your intention? What were you trying to go for in this? Was there a reference that you were going for? That would have. I in this case, like, I'm so ingrained in daily feedback giving that like I didn't need that context to give at least my point of view on it. But I think maybe the biggest point I'll make here is that in asking for feedback, two things need to happen. One is that the person asking for feedback needs to be fully receptive for that feedback. Sounded like you were, so I think the expectation was like you're ready to see feedback, but also be very clear what it is you're looking for in that feedback. People send me stuff or like just randomly send me stuff. If you ask me like, what do you think? I can tell you what I think for sure, but the most effective feedback is gonna be like, what do you want to get out of this? Do you want like just a big thumbs up that you did something? Cool, you did something. That's great. Do you want mixed feedback? Do you want mastering feedback? Do you want conceptual feedback? Like, what would be most useful? I think that would be my biggest advice to give somebody when they're asking for feedback is be very clear and deliberate about what it is that you want in that feedback. And be ready to hear it. That's the other thing. Be receptive to the feedback as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot about receiving feedback in the last couple years. I think the biggest benefit for my personal ability to receive feedback has been my wife. That
Mm.
it certain I don't know, maybe it's different for different people, but it seems like it is very useful for learning about all of one's weaknesses to be in relationship.
For sure.
And and you just
Wholeheartedly agree.
gotta learn as fast as possible. And I'm very slow at this to receive feedback.
That's beautiful, and I would agree that relationship is one of the best paths to growth. And I would say that outside of even romantic relationships, I would say all of our relationships, and in some ways, everything is relationships. So those are the places that we both are mirrored back the things that we like about ourselves or like about the stuff we're working on, but also things we don't. And so that's where we get a chance to actually have some clarity is in sharing and relationships. So this actually brings us back to sharing as well. You can't really grow if you don't share, and you can't really get that feedback if you're not receptive to it. So being open to but understanding that someone else's perspective is just their unique lens. It doesn't really mean anything more than that. Even the feedback I'm giving you now, I'm giving you the feedback from my own perspective. It is no more valuable than it being my perspective. You might get completely other feedback from someone else, and it's up to you to take that information and genuinely move forward with whatever feels right to you in your heart.
Yeah, definitely. Which is a fun balance to strike.
For sure.
I'm curious as to where your vision is going now and where you see the future in your own artistic path.
That's a great question. Um, and I when you had some of those questions, I was sort of like, yeah, that's a good question. Then as I explore it more, like I guess the honest answer would be like I have no idea. And the reason the reason I truly have no idea is that anytime that I'm saying where I am, I'm only referencing what already happened. So I'm only really like reflecting on what's already happened. I would have never predicted that in March 2020, a global pandemic would happen that would completely change my work and home life entirely. And if that hadn't happened, um, uh, I would not have created Mastronaut. I didn't really have the time before. I had been creating demos, but because all of a sudden I was inside the whole time, I did that. And through creating Mastronaut, found other artists which were inspiring me that had me create Gold Ablaze. So I would have never seen those things come to fruition if it wasn't this time of upheaval and craziness. Um, and you know, when you said that you were depressed, I was the same. It was such a crazy time, and actually, it was. I think Mastronaut, the loud reaction was in contrast to the quiet, scared depression I felt of the time of all of a sudden all this loss and worry about how much more could potentially happen, and so much has happened. But um,
Yeah.
the truest answer I can say is I don't know where this is going. My hope would
Yeah.
be that more people discover my music and it's shared organically, and and it brings some value to them. In particular, I'm really excited about Gold Ablaze. It's probably the most genuine musical approach that I've taken to date. It feels
Hmm.
effortless to do. I keep writing. I'm going to have this 6-song EP out in April, and I've already got 4 more songs done and a couple others that are started. So, um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
want a
the
whole
the
album.
advice you got it, and the advice on that is, and it's not like always take the path of least resistance. Like sometimes the creative process is really like pushing through and like really grinding out just to get one piece finished. But I will say when you find that thing that just feels really effortless, at least for me, it feels really inspiring to run with it because it's easy to do and it feels genuine. So if you can, and it, you know, like as I said, it took me like 10 or 12 years to find that particular iteration, and who knows how long that's going to go on. But
Mhm.
if you find something that feels right and is easy to do, run with it because that's rare. At least it's been rare for me.
Yeah, I feel that. I can't wait until I'm at Burning Man and have stayed up all night and am watching the sunrise, and suddenly some giant art car rolls into view that looks like a minotaur with Hello Kitty on the top, and then I hear that sound and I'm like, wait, do I recognize that? Am I actually at my desk working? Oh no, no, that's some chill gold ablaze welcoming the sunrise.
I would
That
love that. That's a great vision. And somehow a very accurate vision as well.
that'll be my ideal for listening to your album.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jared. I
Well,
appreciate that.
yeah, I think it was fantastic talking to you, Brian. Really good
Fantastic
to
talking to you.
catch up.
For sure. And I will leave you with encouragement on your theme. Keep going. And I'm happy to be a resource here if you need for more creative feedback as you're developing that. And I think overall, your idea for this podcast series, if it is a podcast, is great. And I think
Video cast.
also video cast and also seems very genuine to you. So in the same spirit of Gold Blaze feels very genuine to run with it, I think you should just continue to push forward and run with this idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Brian. I
Pleasure, man.
will listen to your album soon. Oh, and could you briefly say how people can find you?
Yes. For finding me directly, it is brianscherman.com, and that's BrianScherman. Gold Ablaze is on all platforms. It will be out on Spotify, Apple Music, all those things, but you can go to goldablaze.com and see the website there. And then finally, Mastronaut is Mastronaut Music. So it's like astronaut, but with an M in front of it, mastronautmusic.com, and that'll get you to most of my stuff.